Hello, I'm Odin, and today I'm going to make number 3 of 3 different Star Wars helmets that I had originally promised my Patreons over a year ago. It's the Endor Rebel Trooper helmet from Return of the Jedi. So I think I'm going to want some help with this build. What I think I want is somebody that I know that can do some 3D creation, somebody whose channel's already done this type of thing. I know a guy that's done a really awesome job with making a Millennium Falcon bench. So let's see if I can get a hold of James from the Rebel Base Build and see if he's willing to help. Hello, James. I was contacting you because I need some 3D modeling work, and I've seen what you can do in Rebel Base Build, and I think you're the guy that can do this.
Hey Odin, sounds awesome. 3D support. Is this for May the 4th be with you?
Actually, it's May the 5th, or I mean May the 6th.
Okay, sounds great. What do you need?
A while ago on my Patreon site, I had a poll and there was a 3-way tie over which Star Wars helmet to make. Well, I've got one left to do, and that's the Rebel Trooper helmet that was seen on the Forest Moon of Endor. This is the same helmet that Luke and Leia wore during the speeder bike chase in Return of the Jedi. Anyway, I was kind of hoping that maybe you would help me out and I could actually get this thing finished.
Good man. We like anything Rebel here.
What I was hoping to get was a really good 3D model we could then turn into a 2D pattern so we could replicate the parts in foam.
Totally. Sounds great. In fact, why don't we mix it up a little bit and I'll model some cool versions of those headphones. You know, put the resin printer through its paces and all that. What do you think?
No, that sounds great. Perfect. But can I get the part shipped to me in time for May the 5th?
You mean May the 6th?
Right, exactly.
So excited. Let's do this.
All right, for those of you who don't know, James has another YouTube channel called The Rebel Base Build, and he actually does a really good job of mixing foam construction with 3D printed parts for all the greebles and little technical pieces. And I thought the Millennium Falcon bench that he'd done recently was really top notch, and then the story that he told with the video itself was very cool. So I highly suggest that you go check out James's channel, The Rebel Base Build. You'll be able to see the rest of the set come to life as he continues to fill out the room to look like the Millennium Falcon. First thing I wanted to start on was getting the soft parts of the helmets made, patterning the fabric pieces. I asked Felicia for her expertise. She does this type of thing for a living, and it turns out her approach was pretty much what I typically would do. We found pictures of the World War II flight helmet that was used in the movie as the base for the Endor helmet, and copied the seam lines onto our pattern. Once we were happy with the look, we just removed the aluminum foil and duct tape from the styrofoam head, cut them out, and copy the flattened pieces onto cardboard. The cardboard is much easier to use to mark the pattern lines because it keeps its shape, and we can add seam allowances to the edges.
And are these only 2 pieces?
Yeah, it's just 4 panels.
Cool.
We've got one full panel here,
Yeah.
and then the
That
banana, and then the banana, and the panel. That's it.
So, okay, cool.
Yeah. There's some extra pieces that go on top of it, and
Yeah, that's bias tape. We'll make bias tape, and then we will just bias tape the whole damn thing.
cool. We copy the pattern onto some fabric. Now this fabric is left over from a previous project, and I really like the heavy texture that it has. Now originally, I had asked Felicia for help with just getting the pattern made, but she loves costumes in Star Wars so much, she just started sewing the helmet and putting it all together. So I started working on the parts for the top of the helmet.
What?
Well,
It's not as...
using this, I don't need to have that big of a pleat
Yeah,
to layer
it's a
it.
tighter pleat, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's why I said you
I'm
gotta find
using-
the right tool.
I'm using, an 1.25 inches worth of fabric to... Oh yeah, that's totally...
Edges is the secret.
I kept thinking they were typical pleats, like the folds all go the same way, but Felicia realized that they were not. They're actually box pleats, which means they're going to be a little more work, but have a really good look when they're finished.
So let's see how much this did of this.
About 2/3?
Yeah.
Oh, almost.
About 2/3.
We check the new piece of the helmet and see that we need to sew a few more pleats.
How are you thinking?
I'm thinking that's plenty.
Okay.
All the pleats are pressed, so we can try to get some good edges on them. We stuck wooden coffee stir sticks into each pleat to help them stay flat, and we didn't pull them out until the last minute when sewing the first edge shut. And to clean up both sides, we covered them with strips of the same fabric. We made some bias tape from the same materials to finish the edges of the helmet. Now this was actually a lot of effort, and we probably didn't need to do it because this fabric has a good amount of flex anyway, but it's still nice to do it the right way. With the edges covered, it's looking a lot like the vintage helmet. And Felicia added an elastic gather in the back of the neck. What James had worked out over on his channel, the Rebel Base Build, was the full geometry of the hard pieces of the helmet. It's the green ring that runs around the head, the vents that are on the back of the head, and he worked on the ear covers. Now, historically, these are basically just headphones in the original helmet, or it's a rubber donut that holds the headphone speakers in place. To spice up the helmet some, he added some panel lines to the ring and a cool grebel piece that could sit in the center. Now, in the movie, they just stuffed black open cell foam into the ears to fill them out, and that also let the actors be able to hear while wearing the helmets. Now, over on his channel, Rebel Base Build, not only does he fully explain his whole process for creating the files, he also 3D printed the earpieces and shipped them to me. I do appreciate that he sent something physical to include in the build, because that way it's a fully collaborative project. Now, he broke his geometry into a pepakura file, which is easy to print out and tape together. So this is really good looking. James, you did a great job laying this out. This is super easy to see and understand. And as I look at this very closely, I can see one thing that pepakura files do that we don't have to do in foam, but it's going to cause a sizing issue. And this isn't anything that James did wrong. This is standard for pepakura because it's trying to take a flat piece of paper and fold it into a compound curve, right? Paper doesn't want to do that. So you have to put darts in it. And this outside ring here is, it's the outside ring of the hat. It has a series of darts. Those are little cutouts you do in fabric when you bring them together. It has a series of darts along the top edge of the ring. There's a pretty good one here. There's another good sized one over here. But each of these panels, some of these are really tiny, but each of these panels is a little itty bitty dart that needs to be cut so it can be brought together in order to get that compound shape that you can't get in paper. Which means that if I just cut it out straight and cut a piece straight out of foam, the top edge is going to be too big to fit the inside ring. So I'm going to need to adjust for that and cut a little bit off of the ends, because I don't really want to cut it into multiple pieces. So I'm going to cut a little bit off the ends and hopefully get the whole ring to shorten up a little more. I cut the patterns out and traced the big parts onto some 6mm HD foam. And the two smaller pieces, they're cut from 4mm foam. That way they'll be inset. And also, I've got a 3D printed part that I'm going to be putting in. So I'm actually going to be incorporating a 3D printed part within the foam helmet, which is neat. Have I done that before? I don't think I've done that before. So this is kind of cool. Thank you, James, for the 3D printed part. So that's why this needs to be 4mm, so it can all be set inside. So I'll do that later. Let's get this cut out. And of course, then there's the bill. We'll get to the bill or the brim or whatever of the hat. We'll get to that in a minute. When it comes time to cut the pieces out, not all the sides are cut the same way. This piece is the big side ring. So the bottom edge, which is a larger arc, that's cut just straight up and down on a 90 degree. So are the two sides that glue together. The top, I want to do on a 45 or thereabouts. I can be a little less, it's okay. The outside ring on the top is also cut on a 45. Straight up and down. Now the inside of this ring only has to match up with the top of the helmet, which happens to be a compound curve shape, right? It's the top of a head. Most of our heads are kind of domed, most. So I'm going to actually cut these on an angle as well, so it'll fit lower down on the helmet, right? If I cut it straight up and down, then as the curve of the helmet comes by, the 6mm will hit, and I'll have a little bit of a bump, which is not that big of a deal. But if I cut it on an angle, it'll actually sit lower, and I think that'll be better. All the parts are glued together using contact cement, which is applied to both sides of each seam, and then you allow the cement to mostly dry. It takes a few minutes, but then the parts will stick together. Now I'm holding the parts flat on the table when I stick them together because that'll help the seams be, flat. I'm not sure what's happening, but the inside ring is smaller than the outside ring. So these aren't going to glue together without causing a whole bunch of pucker on this part, which I really don't want to have happen. So I think my solution is going to be take a strip of 4mm, and I'll just glue it all along the edges. And then I should be able to glue this inside without a problem, and I'll have a slight beveled edge around the outside. That may not be canon, but I think it's going to look just fine. The bottom ring is cut on an angle, so when it's glued to the flat cut of the side, I get the right shape on the ring. I fully glue the 4mm panels in place on the back before adding the 3D printed vents. That way, all the visual lines in the helmet will line up and it'll look smooth. Now, I did grind down a little bit on the resin printed part, for a better fit. My cuts were still a little off, so I did need to add some 2mm foam as a filler. All right, and I've got the 3D printed vent pieces in the back. That's pretty cool. I think that's a first for me. I think it's the first time I've had a 3D printed part specifically fit into the basic shape of the foam part. I may have put a 3D printed part on top of something as detailed before. I think it's the first time I put something in it. That's really pretty cool. I can test fit the ring to the helmet, and I decide to cut a bit out of the upper ring to let it sit lower on the head. No. No. I don't think this is going to work. I've already distracted myself too much. So I've made a foam bill using the pepakura pattern. Now, pepakura again is using paper in order to make a compound curve, so it has tons of little darts and things cut into it so it can make that shape, which is a shape foam is really good at doing, right? So the pattern here isn't really working for me. It ended up being 10 individual shapes of foam that I had to glue together to get this bill, and even then I wasn't sold on the shape. I mean, this could use work, this could happen, but by the time that much work needed to be done, I'll just cut a new one that's a single piece that's just a sickle shape, and once that's put in place and then brought down, that's going to be fine. So one piece of foam, all I have to do is sew inside of a piece of fabric and done. So this is the shape I'm going to go with. The final bit to my foam construction was to clean the edges up, smooth out the seams, and remove excess glue. After I painted them both with olive drab Plastidip, I realized that I forgot to add the dent on the side of Leia's helmet. So I used my rotary tool and carefully ground out the dent using a grinding stone, making sure that I didn't cut all the way through the foam. When Felicia came back, she was very excited with the idea of making Leia's Endor poncho, and I had plenty of green-brown fabric that she could work with. Now, she had spent a few days thinking about how to make the hood work and how to make it look just like it was in the movie when it was sitting on her shoulders.
That's not that bad. I can get behind this. Feel like I'm ready to be an Ewok. And this all folds up underneath this so it can lay flat and nice and pretty like hers did.
Now, she really spent a lot of time on the hood. It was not as quick as this video makes it sound.
Yay, I have a hood!
As she started working on the poncho, I painted the vents black. I also worked on adding a black wash to the ring overall, but this time I just painted black paint in areas and then wiped it away with water. And I just continued covering the whole thing in black smudges, just making it a little dirtier. Having cut the poncho square, Felicia added some interfacing. Now this is just a layer of lightweight canvas. She sewed it to the sides because there's a visible seam on the sides in the movie, and the poncho has a bit more body to the fabric there. I added silver paint chips to the edges of the ring and inside the tent. I was mindful not to overdo this effect because that's very easy to do. I also cut a stencil for the emblem that's on the right side of the ring and marked it with a white pen. Then I painted on a layer of orange. This will help cover up the dark green, and that'll also let me paint red with just one additional coat. And then I can also paint yellow with just one additional coat, because red and yellow acrylic paint would never cover that green all on their own, not in a single layer anyway, probably more like 4. While I was painting the rings, Felicia started to sponge paint the camo pattern onto the poncho. Now the hood piece is still separate because it's going to be much easier to paint these parts separately. But at the same time, painting up the hood as a complete piece was better because the pattern wasn't going to be broken up at the seam lines. So in the middle of trying to get everything else done, I remember that there's 2 more bits of fabric that need to get taken care of in order to make the helmet work right. I've got to make the bill, the sun visor that goes in the front of the helmet. Then James supplied a really awesome ear cover. So this is far more detailed than what's actually in the movie. I don't care, I agree with him, this looks better. So this needs to be on the side of the head, but it shouldn't be flat. There's actually a bit of a bulge on the helmet. So I'm cut a bit of floor mat foam on an angle that matches the profile of the 3D printed piece. I'll cut the center out so it's more comfortable to fit over the ear, but then I need to cover the outside of this with the same fabric so it looks like it's part of the helmet. I traced my horseshoe pattern onto some fabric. I pinned the 2 layers together and I cut them both out at the same time. And then things really started to get busy in the shop. Felicia started to work on another helmet. She's here sewing together a second cloth helmet from the same poncho fabric. And I'm tearing apart a vinyl purse from a thrift store so we can use the leather-like sides for the ear flaps and other connectors that goes on the helmet. Felicia is sewing the ear flaps so they can be turned right side out. The flaps are sewn a little lower than the corners are on the helmet, so they'll drop down the side of my face more. And then they're top stitched to have a clean edge. I cut 2 sets of the arc shapes that go on the sides of the helmet. These will have the 4 snaps put on them, as we see in the original World War II helmets. While Felicia made the top ridges for the second helmet, I started to just use contact cement to glue the horseshoe of fabric around the ear foam. The contact cement worked really well on this heavy fabric, wrapping over both edges of the foam easily. And here's a little more of me hammering snaps in place in the final arcs. Felicia folded up her poncho twice, and then marks the quarter circle that she needs to cut out the head hole. That's going to be right in the center.
When you cut something and you want it to be circular or round, cut straight for 1/4 to 1/2 inch before you start curving, so you don't end up with a point like this or like this. Just cut straight for just 1/4 inch, and then you start your curve. And then you end up with no point. There's no point.
There's no point.
Yes, no, I totally should have painted the inside, but I'm running out of steam, so this is what we have so far. But
Fine.
it's the right size? Okay.
Yeah. While she attached the hood to the poncho, the resin printed ear covers were spray painted black and then dry brushed with a medium gray. And the grebel bit that goes in the very center, I dry brushed that silver. So all the little details that James added in here is looking really, really good. Okay, I think I've got all the parts assembled. What I need to get painted has been painted. I'm ready to just finally put this thing together. Because we're running out of time to get the build done, con crunch is still real, I decided to just super glue the ear covers right to the raised foam parts. And I also super glued the grebel bits inside of each ear. The glue is stuck to the paint inside the ear cover, but that's not that big of a deal because it's fairly recessed and I think it's safe and it's not going to pop off. I also decided to use super glue to stick the ears right to the side of the helmet. Now I was concerned that this would actually be brittle, but the glue seeped completely through the fabric and stuck to my hand. So I'm not worried at all about the parts just falling off. So this piece needs to go on and I should just trim that a little. Cut it wide for that reason so I could trim it. These were also super glued in place. I was very pleased that this particular vinyl would take super glue because not all vinyls do. It feels like that at this stage, it could easily be modified into any kind of steampunk or Studio Ghibli style helmet. Okay, good. Encouraged by how well the super glue took to the ears, I decided to use it again for the front bill, this time gluing the visor right to the inside of the foam ring. It's not often that you get a princess helping you to adjust how the armored ring sits on your hat.
Sorry.
It's all right. I decided to go with more of a super glue for now, just attaching the ring at the 4 points where the pleated strip edge touches the foam ring. And I also think I add a little drop at the front. Now if it doesn't hold, I can always come back and add more glue or even stitch the ring down. Felicia felt it was important to stitch the corners of the brim to the cloth on the helmet. And I do agree, it is a much more secure way to attach parts for the helmet. The material used in this project came from all over the place. Some got shipped from the UK, some I picked up at local shops, and there are materials that I had hoarded away many, many years ago. Well, I had originally said I was going to make one more helmet in order to complete my promise to the patrons, but why make one when you can make two?
I wanted my own.
Absolutely, and your poncho is kick-ass.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome, you nailed it. You got the hood down right, and yeah, it looks great.
I can see what the thought process went into making it. I genuinely can. From
Right.
the people in the World War II, how they wanted to make their hoods, to the person who was the wardrobe stylist on set that had to pin everything flat and press.
Impressed to keep it all perfect between shots. So, if the viewers are interested, would you be willing to do a full video on the build of the poncho?
Yeah, let me know down in the...
Yeah, so definitely. Let us know in the comments if you're interested in seeing the entire poncho build, because I think we shot most of it. We should be able to do that if you want to see that video. Be happy to put it together for you.
Yeah, I patterned it. We have how the whole hood looks.
Which is something that never happened in the movie.
Nope, she never wore her hood, but it does work. Haha. I know, most of the patterns that I saw were just like a hood with the circle sewn on the outside front, which
Right.
was tempting.
Tempting,
I was like,
sure,
a tube.
easier.
We could just, there's a lot of ways, but of course I had to do the most complicated way because I was so curious about the pattern. And I think I figured it out.
I think you figured it out. Definitely nailed the poncho. And I would like to say a huge thank you to Rebel Base Build. James, you really nailed the shapes of the helmet. And the fact that you supplied a full 3D model, including all the soft parts as a reference to make sure that we understood, that was a big help. Thank you a whole lot. In fact, we probably... Hey, James, just thought we'd contact you and show you how everything turned out.
That is amazing. I mean, they are both so good.
So I'd just like to thank all of you for watching this my first really big major crossover, the everything we put together here today, and it's been a lot of fun. I'm really glad to have two of these. And I know there's going to be lots of different ways that you can put together an outfit to take on the Empire in a forest planet.
And that's how Odin makes.
Hi, and welcome to the recorded This is the Thing with the Thing, and I'm doing sort of old habit, and we got a white head today. How's it going?
Heads will roll.
And heads will roll.
We're
Thanks.
funny.
Thanks for watching our show. We'll see you next week. I want to thank Charles Beck, Gunyan Gustson, and all of my Patreon supporters. My Patreon support is the #1 thing that makes this show possible. If you like the video, don't forget to subscribe. Have an idea for something for me to make? Please leave a comment below. And if you make any of these projects, you can send me a picture.